So one more minute. All right, it is 10 o'clock a.m. and I'm going to start the call and the webinar, but I wanted to check who else is on the line other than Charlie. I see Andrea's name, but I want to make sure.
This is Andrea. I'm on the line. I was muted.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay, that's great.
Start.
Awesome. And Charlie, you can do the same. And I welcome you both to the webinar. You are the two people that I see currently on the webinar. You both know me. So I will be leading the webinar today. Thomas is on a romantic getaway in New York with Raphael. So thank you for being here this morning. And as Andrea mentioned, the best way to do this is really if you guys mute from your end, it will eliminate any background noise. And then as we go to periods of discussion, just unmute yourself. And I'm going to hop right into it. So this is class number 3, and today we are going to focus on communication awareness. And I'm going to start the call by looking at what our assignment was from the last webinar. So the assignment was to begin to invite your parts into your dreams and your physical experience and to notice how they show up. To notice any disowned parts or parts you do not want to engage with. And to begin to journal what shows up and to choose an important conversation that you would be willing to talk about where you felt that the energy or the outcome of the conversation was significant. So in a few minutes, I'll open the line to hear from you and to hear what you got out of the assignment. But before we do that, I want to distinguish skill number 1, awareness. So awareness is the foundation of effective communication. It is fundamental to all inner and personal.
You are now muted.
It is fundamental to all inner and interpersonal communication situations. It is learning to be non-judgmentally aware, moment by moment, of your and your communication partner's ways of being, physical and emotional feelings, thoughts, current communication needs and primary needs, and conflict, or what we call a needs clash. I need one thing and you need another. You'll also begin to notice or start to notice your parts are interacting too. We refer to that as thinking, but consider that thinking is actually parts interacting with parts. So check into your parts. What ways of being do they have? What are their physical and emotional feelings? What are their thoughts? Their current communication needs and primary needs, and any needs clash that they have. Okay, so I'm going to open the call, and I want to hear from you. What have you noticed since the last webinar regarding your personality parts? And what parts did you notice are dominating or are more in the background? Essentially, what are you aware of?
You are now unmuted.
So who would be willing to go first? What's shown up for you?
This
Charlie?
is Andrea.
Oh,
You go, Charlie.
okay.
Is it just the two of us?
I think so.
I think so. That's what I'm seeing on my screen.
Okay. I'm also here, Joanne DeRay.
Okay, so I am aware that different parts emerge now and then, and I get present to two people in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's one part that doesn't want to do anything.
Uh-huh.
and there's another part that's always reasoning why we should do it.
Yes.
And,
Perfect.
but they don't stay, or I don't know if they don't stay around very long, but it's like I'm only present to it for maybe a minute or two at the most, and then they disappear. That's how it's occurring for me.
Yeah. And which part do you feel leads? Which one do you leads in terms of the behavior, your behavior changes when that part is dominating or leading?
Well, this is how it's occurring for me right now. I think the part, so I think I'm transforming and I'm in transition right now.
Yeah.
But the part that was like less dominant is starting to emerge. Meaning the part that is for things, and the part that is against everything or disempowering is starting to subside, is how I want to describe it.
That's great. That's called harmonizing, Charlie, and I'm sure Thomas will touch upon that in our workshop. So that's perfect.
Cool.
Yeah. So Andrea, what's showing up for you?
So what shows up for me is I'm looking at skill number 1, awareness. So key attitudes or ways of being. So when I get like too many things on my plate, so at work there's, I had all these meetings coming up and placing kids in special education, and I was a case manager, and so there's a feeling of first there's overwhelm, and then I break it down, but what I'm noticing in the aftermath is like I set things up, I managed, I think I'm being present, but after, it's almost like this young conversation of now I get to reward myself with food, or I don't feel as disciplined after. So yesterday I'm writing more reports for upcoming meetings, and I'm in overwhelm, and I just give in. It's like, okay, if I just ate something, but then I just don't stop eating, so I'm giving in. So there's a younger conversation of wanting something and giving in to that younger preschool almost.
Yeah, no, I totally get that.
And I work with preschoolers. So it's like I'm getting into, and I see them tantrum, so even though I'm not doing enough, but it's like I just go in and I grab something and I numb myself. So so there's that part.
So that's 2 parts, right? So there's the overwhelmed part, and then you used a word at the very end, and you talked about a numbing part. So there's a part that wants to numb, and usually it's trying to protect something. So there's an experience it's trying to protect you from, or a feeling it's trying to protect you from, and the way it does that is it tells you go eat. And then there's the part that kind of, it seems like they play together, the overwhelmed part. So they feed off of each other. The overwhelmed part takes over, and then the numbing part goes, oh, let's make sure the overwhelming part doesn't take over, so let's go eat, because then it'll reduce this feeling of overwhelm.
Yes.
So that's perfect. That's perfect. That's great work, Andrea. And we'll investigate more of this multiplicity of parts and how they play with each other throughout the webinar. So you're in a perfect space. Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, and I know who you are, but I don't know your name. I'm blocking out.
Oh, Rasha.
Oh, this is Rasha?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you. Okay. You sound so, I don't know. Grown up. I don't know. Okay, thank you, Rasha.
All right, awesome. Is there anybody else on the call that joined the call? Okay, perfect.
I'm on the call. This is Joanne.
Who is this? Sorry.
Joanne.
Joanne. Welcome, Joanne. So do you have anything you want to share, Joanne? Anything you noticed since the last webinar? Anything around your parts or
Not really at this point.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to mute the call again, and then we're going to move into empathic listening.
You are now muted.
So Stephen Covey says, being understood by others is the greatest need of all. He describes empathic listening as reflecting what a person feels and says in your own words to their satisfaction, so they feel listened to and understood. Empathic listening is not listening to advise, counsel, replay, refute, solve, fix, change, judge, agree, or disagree, question, analyze, or figure out. So, what does empathic listening sound like? Consider that sometimes you and I are genuinely interested in another and what they have to say. But for the most part, we have to generate interest. So what does it mean to generate? To generate means to produce, bring, or apply energy. Until it becomes a habit, consider that we consciously choose to use this skill, empathic listening, especially when your true self is solidly guiding you. That is, true self-leadership is present. You listen empathically when you genuinely feel you and your communication partners are equals. The alternative is that they're feeling superior or inferior, or you're feeling superior or inferior to them. And when you're genuinely interested in your communication partner versus being dutiful or strategic. And fourth, you listen empathically when you're not distracted, to focus on your communication partner right now. So here's an example. Ed's been transitioning, Ed is my husband, he's been transitioning into a new job, and there's been quite some tension in his office about some of the reorging that's been going on. So he's been really stressed lately. And when he's ready to share about his day, I consciously turn towards him, and then I ask him questions about what he shared and what's happened throughout his day. And so I listen empathically, and I say things like, wow, it seems like it's been very intense, or it sounds like they received that guidance well. There's a lot of quote-unquote you in the statements I say to him so that he experiences my genuine interest. So now I'm going to open the call, and I would like to hear from you. What does empathic listening look and sound like in your life? Where in your life do you have or give the experience of empathic listening? I'm unmuting the call.
You are now unmuted.
This is Andrea.
Andrea, thank you.
So I have a reputation of I think I do, like of talking a lot and monopolizing the conversation. So I'll say something to my boyfriend like, so I want to listen to you, and he'll make a joke about it, like, you know, I don't usually do that. So empathic listening. So he really gets, like, when I'm listening to him, like, I want to hear what you have to say, and I'll ask him questions about it. And the real key for me in empathic listening is to listen without judging, because I'm like, you know, saying, instead of listening, like I'm saying something in response, and where he, you know, he might not get the feeling of being heard, and
yeah.
I'm aware that I do that, and so I'm intentional when I'm listening. I didn't call it empathic listening, but that is what I think I'm doing, is when I'm being present and listening, and not judging.
You're applying energy, right? Like that's what we were talking about earlier. Like
yeah.
You have to consciously put some focus and energy into it. That's perfect.
Yes.
Perfect.
So,
And we're going to talk about that type of communication in a little bit. It's perfect, Andrea.
Okay.
Thank you. Who else? Anything you see for yourself or becoming aware of around this concept of empathic listening?
Charlie?
Charlie, thank you.
So I can't say that I listened empathically in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Now maybe I did it off and on and wasn't present to it. And I'm sure I did to some degree, but for the most part I wasn't conscious about the way I listened.
Yeah.
But yesterday I actually had an opportunity to practice listening empathically. Someone came to my shop, and occasionally I sand things on my sander. I have a big commercial sander. And they come, and I really created, okay, I'm going to really listen to this guy. I mean, I intentionally remember thinking that. I'm going to listen to him with no judgment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what came, he was telling me that they just discovered that his 7-year-old son has terminal disease. And he was telling me how much he was stressing about it, and the money, and his kid, and his wife. And I really got his world.
Yeah.
And when he left, I really felt like he had let go of something, like of the burden. And I didn't try to fix him. I asked maybe a couple questions like we learned in class the other night.
Yeah.
Just to make sure I was getting him.
Yeah.
But it was really a great experience, and I can't say I've experienced it that way before. So that's what happened yesterday.
Awesome. Awesome. There is something that, and that's perfect what you bring up, Charlie, because empathic listening isn't something we're going to do all the time, right? I mean,
probably not.
When you're paying $5 as you're paying for your parking ticket, you're probably not going to be practicing empathic listening.
Probably not.
Right? And it's okay. It's appropriate. Like there's times when, there is a time and a place for it, but the key is now we can look for these signs of what it looks like and how to practice it. Which brings me to the last bullet on the slide. One last distinction, which we call emotion levels. Thomas and I call it emotion levels, and we refer to them as above the ears or below the ears. When emotion levels are above your ears, your communication partners of emotions are running high. We're saying they're really emotional or they're in an emotional state. And it would be a great time to practice empathic listening, which is kind of like what you did with this client that came into your shop, right? There was high emotions. There was a really sensitive thing he was dealing with, and he did get gotten.
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Would you say when people are in high emotions, they're talking fast?
It's funny you say that because my boss totally does that. Like she stumbles on her own words because she's trying to get it out. And I've noticed when I practice empathic listening with her, she actually slows down. Or she'll say, there's moments of silence because I'm trying to get what she's trying to say, like not to get distracted with, she talks a lot like with her hands and her whole body's moving, and it's like really focusing on what she's trying to say. And I think it's a type of communication awareness, right? It slows everything down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything anybody else wants to add before we move on?
No.
Okay. I'm going to mute the call and we'll move on to the...
You are now muted.
Listening with all of you. So I think one of the things we distinguish through our sharing is that there is a way that we can listen with all of ourselves, like a total presence. So listening with all of you, when your partner or anyone close to you is speaking to you, whether telling you a story, lodging a complaint, or sharing a feeling, give your undivided attention. Listen with all of you, with your ears, with your heart, with your skin, with your breath. Pay attention so completely that everything else disappears. Listen not only to the words, but to the mysterious presence from which those words arise. Listen to the sound of the voice, to the inflections. Listen to the silence between the words. Listen to what was not said, but can still be sensed. In giving absolute attention, become the beloved for which the heart has always longed. Be available in this way for as long as is practical. Then give love and blessings and move on with your day. Whenever you are able to listen, listen with all of you. We live in a multitasking nation. We cook while we talk, while we have an ear out for what's on the news. We drive while we check messages on the cell phone, or while we mumble perfectionaries to what someone is telling us. The most you can hope to receive when you are half listening is information. Then when the other person accuses us of not really being there, you can conveniently say, yes, I was. You just told me, yada, yada, yada. You're off the hook. The charges are dropped. The trial is acquitted. But the acquittal is the booby prize. Everyone loses, and real communication is abandoned. Consider that listening with all of you is the prize. All right. Awareness bubbles. When people communicate, each partner unconsciously maintains a flexible bubble of awareness. So Andrea pointed us to this when she was sharing earlier and talking about how sometimes, she can talk a lot and her other communication partner may not feel heard. And this happens with all of us. So, and this is parts work, right? Like there is a part that behaves this way. So some parts are more self-absorbed. They have no interest or consideration for any other part or for true self. In fact, they may not even know or be aware of true self-leadership, which is the ultimate goal of our work. So as we move through this program, you and I will bounce between dealing with communications happening internally and communications happening externally. And for the sake of practice, we will focus on communications happening externally. So the awareness bubbles we are going to distinguish are about external communications. And of 4 types of bubbles we will distinguish on the webinar, only one promotes effective communication. So I'm going to unmute the call.
You are now unmuted.
And Charlie, can you please read what's on the slide? Charlie?
Okay.
Thank you.
Each person focuses only on their own needs. Their awareness bubble includes only themselves at the moment. For example, my thoughts, feelings, body, and needs are all of these. Either partner may decode this one-person bubble as disrespectful or being ignored by the other.
Perfect. So in a one-person bubble, the person will frequently use words like I, me, myself, mine. They focus mainly on their own experience, their own feelings, their own opinions. And they will likely talk or text nonstop and possibly interrupt communications. If you're having a conversation, they constantly interrupt. And they give little or no eye contact. They're rarely checking in with the other person. So that's a one-person bubble. All right. Next one is a two-person bubble. Andrea, could you read that?
Sure. Each partner has a stable two-person bubble, a genuine mutual attitude, and C wants to fill each person's current communication and other needs equally. Mutual awareness of effective communication skills promotes filling each person's current needs well enough if their respective true selves are guiding their personalities.
Thank you. So in a two-person bubble, both parties will use words like mine, yours, we, I, equally during a typical conversation. They'll consistently encourage dialogue versus long monologues. They won't interrupt their partner while they're talking unless the partner begins to ramble or talk too much. They'll check in to confirm understanding and to stay present with the other person. They feel and exhibit genuine interest and respect and empathy, like we were talking of earlier in empathic listening. Perfect. So, Joanne, can you read the half-person bubble, please?
Yes. One partner has a one-person bubble, and the other has a two-person bubble. Whether either partner feels ignored, excluded from their partner's bubble, he may feel frustrated and disrespected and stop listening, though he may pretend otherwise.
Perfect. And that one's really pretty self-explanatory, right? It's like part of me is here and part of me is not, right? So perfect. All right. And the last one is the no-person bubble. Neither partner is aware of their or their partner's current thoughts, feelings, or needs. They each focus somewhere else, like the past, the future, or another person, place, idea, or event. As long as neither person needs to feel acknowledged, this no-person bubble may feel mutually okay. So for me, this looks like Sunday morning. It's on Facebook. I'm reading the paper. We're both drinking coffee, and nobody's talking.
I get it.
So does anybody see anything or want to share anything on communication bubbles? Like, is there something that's showing up for you or you're thinking about that you're like, oh my God, I totally see this in my life right now?
Joanne?
Yes.
Having it demonstrated this way, especially with the pictures showing the bubbles included, it brings to mind how many times I go between different bubbles, or my conversations would be between different bubbles. So I just took a 10-day vacation, and I was down in Southern California. And while I was down there, I was making it a point to connect with many people from my past, people I hadn't seen for a while, or people I went to high school with, or whatever. Mm-hmm. I could see the different bubble communications with the different people I connected with.
Mm-hmm. Totally, right? Yeah.
And my satisfaction with the connection varied depending on the different bubbles.
Totally. And it's totally appropriate, right? Like I have a colleague at work, and I just noticed after the workshop, actually, Charlie, so on Friday, and I just noticed, I'm like, oh my God, I'm totally in a half-person bubble. And then it gives me options, right? It's like, oh, either I'm okay in maintaining a half-person bubble, or I need to create a two-person bubble.
Yeah.
And practice empathic listening.
Charlie?
Yes, Charlie?
I can Andrea, right when you were speaking that, I started thinking about our family at Thanksgiving. And I can see how all those different bubbles
my gosh, yeah.
are there, they're not there, this person's talking, it's me, and then the no person bubble, it's quiet for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then it starts up again.
That is perfect. That's so funny. Totally true. So take a moment and on your notebook, do a little status check. So I'm going to read the following bullets, and then just put 1 means never and 5 means always. I'm going to mute the call.
You are now muted.
This awareness bubble concept has value. 1 to 5, 1 being never, 5 being always. I'm aware of my and my communication partner's awareness bubbles in important communications. I'm aware of my and my communication partner's respect messages in important communications. I maintain a two-person bubble in important social situations. I am motivated to become more aware of awareness bubbles now. I want to share this concept now with, and someone's name. So great. Thanks, everyone, for the interactive dialogue. It's great. All right, so 6 reasons we communicate. Consider that there's 6 reasons we communicate. Number 1, respect. This is a universal need. Number 2, to give or receive information. Number 3, to vent. Number 4, to cause action or to feel potent. Number 5, to generate excitement, somehow to escape boredom or a need for stimulation. 6, to avoid discomfort. Decoding communication messages. Consider that while we are communicating with others, we're constantly thinking or decoding their communication message. And these are the questions we ask ourselves. What does the other person think? What are they feeling? What do they want or expect of me? And are they being respectful in their communication? So what is respect? The definition of respect in this context is to feel cared for and important. It is to nurture, that is to fill our emotional and spiritual needs. We all constantly need respect, the comforting feeling of worth, acceptance, and approval that regulates our actions. And there are 2 sources for this respect. One is inside of us, and the other we get from others. Consider there are 3 types of respect messages that we are constantly decoding or listening for in people's communication. One is, you seem to feel one up or superior. You care more about your current needs, opinions, and feelings than mine right now. This inherently feels disrespectful. Or you seem to feel one down, inferior. You care more about my needs and feelings than your own. And it subtly invites discounting and disrespect. And lastly, you seem to genuinely value our respective feelings or worth and current needs equally. So we feel equal. So begin to reflect. How often are you aware of these respect messages within you and with others in important conflicts and decision making? What might happen if you raised your awareness of these respect messages? I'm going to open the call.
You are now unmuted.
For yourself or what you're seeing open up for you right now.
Joanne?
Yes, Joanne?
I am very conscious of respect in conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not feeling respected, I won't speak. And I will disengage as soon as possible. And I really don't have a story about, like, they're creeps or anything like that. I just have that it's not working, the communication. Yeah. And I notice that respect for me is a very important component. Even in little things, I expect respect as a human being. Maybe not a respect for who I am. Like they may not be aware of who I am in a lot of different arenas or whatever. Like for example, I have successfully parented 2 kids, and I think they're fantastic. And if somebody doesn't respect the fact of motherhood, it doesn't bother me because that's their issue, not mine. Does that make sense?
It does.
But I won't participate.
Yeah. It's like they don't have value for what you have value for, something that's important to you.
Right. And it doesn't mean anything. That's the thing I think that's most powerful for me, and it's probably been developed only in the last 5 years or so. It used to be like, I'll make sure you respect me when I was younger, you know, and now I really don't have to take that on. So I'm free to move away from that or towards that, depending on what my intention is at the moment.
That's really great. And it's like, you know, who and what type of people you want in your inner circle, right? It's like I'm not going to have someone in my inner circle who's not an equal in terms of the way, whether it's the way they communicate with me or value what's important to me. That's really great. Took me a long time to learn that lesson too.
Right.
But it also makes you conscious to make sure that the other person's aware that you're respecting them.
Right.
You know,
Thank you, Joanne.
Respect comes out of, like, listening empathically is a form of respect in my world.
That is correct. Totally, because you're totally present with them. You're totally there for them. You're totally with them. Yeah.
Yes.
That's really great, Joanne. Thank you.
Charlie?
Anybody else? Yeah, Charlie.
This is an interesting page here, respect messages. You know, looking in the past, I can see that I've experienced when people are speaking to me or we're communicating, I can remember feeling superior. And in other instances, I can remember feeling inferior. And in other situations, I can genuinely remember going, wow, that was a great conversation with that person. And so, you know, I can see now that those types of people where there's respect are who I want to really include in my inner circle.
Yeah.
And I was never had a way to distinguish that before.
Yes.
So really, this is bringing a lot of clarity. Thank you.
Yeah. Same for me. And for me, it's been interesting. So one of the things I shared at the workshop is I currently took a job where I have I supervise supervisors on a team, and just noticing that automatically it changes the relationship of respect messages, because I'm automatically, quote unquote, superior in the sense that they have to report to me. So it was a great distinction that Thomas gave me. And so I have, you know, looking at the messages from a different angle, that no matter what, sometimes it may not feel as equal, but there's a way I can be that they can be more comfortable in sharing whatever it is they want to share, right? But at the end of the day, there may be a directive. So also noticing when to look for and where to look for, like in our inner circle of friends and family, this may look different than in the workplace. And that gave me some freedom, because I was looking for something that maybe may not have been available in that situation. So I'm just sharing that in case that's the case for other folks as well on the call. It was very valuable for me, that coaching. It really helped. Andrea, do you have anything that's showing up for you that you'd like to share?
Well, you know, I'm so grateful to be on this webinar, because I'm looking at myself and where I feel in the superior communication role, and it's not like in a managerial position, you know. So I can see where I do that, and I do that with my boyfriend, and it's usually along like when there's political talk, and he tells me that he thinks that he likes a certain person, and I'm like, it's like I pounce on him right away, like, how did? And it's like I'm so grateful for some of the tools that I have, where it's like he gets to be himself. He gets to like this person or to find out, because I know him, like, you like him or there are certain aspects of something they've said that he thinks are appropriate. And so I can, if I wasn't listening to what he was saying and asking him questions, I would just be in judgment, and then I wouldn't really get what he was trying to communicate. So I see myself doing that, and I'm grateful for the awareness today, because I just had this with him last night, just the awareness that I'm doing this. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really great. One I got recently is when I'm uncomfortable or embarrassed, I will go to the one up or one down. So if I feel awkward or out of place, there's a certain way I speak, and it can fall into either of those categories depending on the context of the conversation. And then another one I noticed is if I want to like vacate a conversation, right? Like I'm looking for my exit strategy, right? And I can go into one of these modes, and so it's really been interesting to watch for that. And then the other thing that's really been impactful for me is there are 6 reasons we communicate, right? So when somebody comes into my office and they want to vent, to just allow them to vent. Like there isn't something to fix, because that's where I go first in that context or in that environment, right? We got to keep the business moving. We got to have this product, blah blah blah. And so versus like, okay, they're just here to vent. Like that's one, and that's it, And I can practice empathic listening and hear them fully, and then they can be on their way. So noticing the when gives me more, or what type of communication has also allowed me to know how to respond a little more in a more conscious manner. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Joanne?
Go ahead, Joanne.
I actually did this with my kids when they were younger, and I had done a landmark course that talked about some of these reasons we communicate. So with my daughters, what I said is, at any time they could come up to me and ask for 60 seconds of venting, and then I wouldn't fix anything, right? And then I would acknowledge, like, let's say they came to me and said, oh, I've got this paper due, and I've got this, and I've got that. And I said, oh, nobody should be forced to do a paper and this and that all in one night. And, kind of just let them know that somebody understood that they felt an overwhelm or confronted or whatever. And then the other 60 seconds they could get on demand was appreciation, that they want to be acknowledged for whatever. And they could just say, like, I want to be acknowledged that I, got an A on this test that I didn't think I could, or, this guy did this and that made me upset. And by their giving me the intention, and I did the 60 seconds to protect me, because there's only so much venting I can take. If somebody's whining, I'm not very talented. So the 60 seconds is like, and it doesn't cost anything to give somebody 60 seconds of your time and acknowledge what they need and want in the moment.
Right.
That's perfect. That's great.
Charlie?
What's fascinating is they still do this today. I'll still get, I want 60 seconds to vent, or I want 60 seconds to be acknowledged.
That's really great. That's so sweet. So I need to share that with my sister.
That is
for her kids, and this gave me, and Charlie, I'll give you an opportunity to share. This gave me total access, right? This empathic listening, because my sister and I are always talking that she comes home, she's tired, she's got a 5-year-old and a newborn, and that she feels that she's not with her 5-year-old in the way that sometimes she feels she needs to be. But this, I think, gives her a source to something, right? Like, you don't have to be this all the way, but if you give that child the time they need in the way they need it in terms of empathic listening or communication, then they can play around and talk and whatnot, and you don't have to be there 100, because that niece of mine, she can talk 100 miles a minute. So, Charlie, go ahead.
First of all, I want to acknowledge Joanne for sharing that technique. That's something I'm going to employ. Hey, I'll give you 60 seconds to say whatever you want to say, and you can vent or do. I've never considered that, but I can see that's a great way to let people share what they're dealing with. But you know what I wanted to really share was, in the past when people would vent, I would make them wrong for that. That was where I would just default go. It's like, oh shit, I got to listen to this now. But I can see that I can have power with that and going, okay, he's venting or she's venting, and really listen to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Mine, Charlie, is to avoid discomfort. So one thing I noticed that where I get kind of in that space of annoyance, whether it's at work or at home, I have no problem with silence. Like, you know how there's these awkward silences sometimes in meetings, or like even with Ed, and it seems like he wants to fill that gap, right? Like he doesn't want that silence to sit or that gap to sit. And we actually talked about this in one of my leadership courses at work. And it's just that people want to avoid the discomfort of the silence. And I used to make that wrong. Like, I used to make them wrong. Versus like, oh, there's just a certain experience, and that's okay too, you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons we communicate. So,
you know where I'm present to that silence, where it's uncomfortable, is when I'm in the car with somebody.
Yeah.
That's where it shows up for me. Yeah. Thank you.
That's really great. Well, thank you, everybody, for this robust conversation. I really appreciate it. So we are to the end of our webinar, actually, so I'm going to share the assignment between now and the next webinar. So your webinar is on November 21st, and this is not a repeat. It's part of your course. In between, practice communicating at equal. So remember the respect messages and practice communicating at equal. With whom could you not? Jot that down, journal about it. And what did you notice? When are there one-up conversations or one-down conversations? When could you practice empathic listening or not? Practice 2 person awareness bubbles. And where you couldn't, have 2-person awareness bubbles. Practice empathic listening. That is listening with all of you. Journal everything you notice and bring it to the webinar, where we will distinguish more in the area of multiplicity. So with that, this is our webinar for today. Does anyone have any questions or something they'd like to share or complete before we end the webinar?
Could you go back to the screen that shows the 6 reasons we communicate? I wanted to write those down.
Okay. Is there a way to get a copy of this PowerPoint?
Yes. I will happily email that to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah.
Okay.
Would you love that? Yeah.
It's hard to get all the notes down when you're listening,
Yeah.
Conversations disappear.
So I know this is a little off base, but there was a movie by Michael Keaton called Multiplicity, where 6 of his personalities showed up. It's hilarious.
Oh, great.
I remember that.
That's like every day for me, Charlie. Well, thank you everybody for taking time this morning to jump on the webinar. It was great being with you. And if you need anything between now and the next webinar, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you
so much.
Would you add me to the list of being sent a copy of the PowerPoint presentation?
Okay. Yes.
This is Joanne. Okay, awesome.
Thank you, Rasha.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Joanne. Andrea, have a great rest of your weekend.
You too. Love you. Bye-bye.
All right. Love you. Bye.
It was over early.